Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. It is Friday and that can only mean one thing. The Kitchen Table series returns for its 41st deck. And in today's video, we are going to take a look at a Bant Exalted deck. What's up, MTG BC? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. It is the Kitchen Table series, our longest running series. And in today's video, we are going to take a nice long look at a Bant Exalted deck. As is generally customary here during the Kitchen Table series, let's begin with the mana base. So we're playing 3 colors, so we're not going to have too many basic lands to talk about during this deck tech. We've got 3 basic plains. We've got 3 basic forests. That's going to be all for the basic lands in this deck tech. So let's start moving right to our non-basic lands. We are going to include 1 copy of Waterlogged Grove. It is the Simic Horizon land. We pay 1 life for a green or a blue. We tap 1 and tap this, sacrifice it to draw a card. That will be much more important later on when we get into our creatures and our spells, of course. To kind of supplement that Waterlogged Grove, we are going to include 3 copies of Breeding Pool. It is our Simic Shockland, and I do say this with the stated understanding that if a 4th copy of Breeding Pool would have been available, it would replace the Waterlogged Grove. So at this moment, 3 copies of Breeding Pool. However, I would prefer a 4th over a single copy of Waterlogged Grove. Moving from Shocklands to Checklands, we are going to play with a full playset of Sunpetal Grove. It comes into play untapped if we control a forest or a plains, which again helps us to have 4 breeding pools because we would have 4 forests for Sunpetal Grove to come into play untapped. 4 copies, Sunpetal Grove. Staying with the Checklands, we're going to have a full playset of Glacial Fortress. It is the Azorius Checkland and comes into play untapped if we control a plains or an island. Again, back to the breeding pool, which is also an island. 4 copies, it's over there, 4 copies of Glacial Fortress. And rounding out the lands of this Exalted deck, we are going to include a playset of an Exalted land. Cathedral of War. At ETB's taps for a colorless, however, it does have the Exalted mechanic, and that means that whenever a creature we control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. 4 copies of Cathedral of War, and that's going to round out the land base of this Bant Exalted deck. It's not going to be the end of our mana, however, because this is Kitchen Table, so we know we're going to have 1 Soul Ring, of course, and we're going to include just a couple of signets to help smooth out this mana. 1 copy of Selesnia's Signet and 1 copy of the Simic Signet, just to help smooth out the 3 different colors that we have in this Exalted deck. Now let's move on to our non-creature spells. We're going to play with a copy of Lightning Greaves, one of the greatest equipment ever made. As we are running an Exalted deck, it's up to us to protect the 1 creature that's going to be going into combat. If we don't have some way to protect the creature, it's going to most likely get picked off with spot removal each and every time. That's the challenge that we have when we are making an Exalted deck. We're not trying to go wide, we're going super tall with just 1 creature. So we're going to include a copy of Lightning Greaves as a way in which to protect our creature, but to also give it haste. Alright, so let's start rolling out with some of our Exalted spells. First playset after the Cathedral of War is going to be 4 copies of Ardent Plea. 1 white and a blue. It's an enchantment that has the Exalted mechanic, and it also has Cascade, and that's all it does. we cast it for 3, we put an Exalted trigger out there on the battlefield in the form of the enchantment, and then we exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a card with a CMC cost of 2 or less. 4 copies of Ardent Plea. Next up on the Exalted countdown, we are going to have 2 copies of Angelic Benediction. 3 and a white, again with the Exalted mechanic, and whenever a creature we control attacks alone, we may tap target creature. 2 copies, Angelic Benediction. Okay, next up we are going to stick with 2 copies, and they're both enchantments again, and this will be the last of our non-creature spells for this particular deck tech. That's going to be 2 copies of Finest Hour. It's an enchantment with a mana value of 5. It's 2, a green, a white, and a blue, and of course it has the Exalted mechanic, and whenever a creature we control attacks alone, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap that creature, and after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So this kind of gives us a relentless assault effect as long as we are attacking with one of our creatures. That just sounds terrible. If it's the first attack phase, it's only going to be the first attack phase. So we're not going to get additional attacks every single time the creature attacks. But it is nice to have the Finest Hour out there, particularly because after the first attack phase is over, the creature is still maintaining those +1/+1s from all of the different Exalted mechanic triggers. When you go for the second combat, the +1/+1s come back again because the creature is going to attack again. So in a way, this is kind of doubling up the Exalted triggers when the creature attacks each combat phase. 2 copies of Finest Hour. Okay, so let's get to our creatures that have Exalted. If we're playing Bant, then we've got green. If we're playing Exalted, we have to include a playset of Noble Hierarch. 1 green, comes down as a 0/1. It has the Exalted mechanic, but it also turns sideways for a green, a white, or a blue. 4 copies of Noble Hierarch, which, as we reflect back on the installation of the mana base, you're starting to see how it was so important to make sure we get a green on turn 1. Hence the Waterlogged Grove, in for the missing 4th copy of Breeding Pool. In turn 1, Noble Hierarch is really going to put us ahead both with our Exalted mechanics and with a mana dork out there as well. All right, next creature with Exalted, a full playset of Kasali Pridemage. Green and a white, it has Exalted on a 2/2 body. We can also tap 1 and sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this helps out the board with the Exalted mechanic. It's a creature that can attack if needed. It doesn't have any evasion. However, more importantly, it has the potential to remove an artifact or an enchantment from the battlefield. 4 copies of Kasali Pridemage. Okay, next up we are going to play with a full play set of Aven Squire. 1 and a white. It's a 1/1 flyer with Exalted. That's it. Not a lot to talk about here. The evasion is huge. Turn 2, casting Aven Squire. We know we're going to be attacking for minimal of 2 or 3 in the air. 4 copies of Aven Squire. All right, so we're going to start bringing the power level up a little bit now with our Exalted creatures. We got our walkers and our manas and our little bird soldiers, and now we have Rafik of the Many. For 1, a green, a white, and a blue, and hopefully some better camera focusing. There we go. Rafik of the Many is a 3/3 with Exalted, and whenever a creature we control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn. So if we're able to curve into Aven Squire, and then we cast the Rafik of the Many, we're going to send a nice double-striking big Exalted creature with evasion right at an opponent. 2 copies of Rafik of the Many. All right, next we have a full playset of one of the greatest pieces of art in my opinion, in all of Magic. And it is a card that I had coveted for such a long time, and during its time in Standard, it was such a high price point, but boy did it plummet upon its subsequent reprinting in Ultimate Masters. and that's a full play set of Sublime Archangel. Before we get to the card and what it's going to do for this deck, that artwork is just exquisite. I don't have any other word to describe it. It is just a magnificent piece of art. Look at that angel. Give me a break. Send me an angel to love, baby. There you go. All right, so for 2 and 2 white, we have a 4/3 flyer with Exalted, and it gives other creatures we control Exalted. However, what we need to point out here is if a creature has multiple instances of Exalted, each triggers separately. So when Sublime Archangel comes down and gives our creatures Exalted when they already have Exalted, that means they have double the Exalted mechanics, which is just going to make the creature that we send into combat even bigger. Particularly if we can get them with the evasion, we are going to be able to knock out our opponents very quickly. 4 copies of Sublime Archangel. And that's only because we can't have 20 copies. Next up, and the last of our Exalted creatures. Yes, we are going to include some creatures in this deck that do not have the Exalted mechanic. And the last of those creatures is going to be a full play set of Battlegrace Angel. 3 and 2 white. It's a 4/4 flyer with Exalted. And whenever a creature we control attacks alone, it gains lifelink until end of turn. 4 copies of Battlegrace Angel. So just take a moment to see how we can just kind of curve into what we do here. Turn 1, Noble Hierarch. Turn 2, let's say we cast an Aven Squire. Turn 3, we drop Rafika the Many. Turn 4, Battlegrace Angel. We're sending an Aven Squire into battle with a 1, 2, 3, 4. We're setting a 5/5 with double strike, with lifelink. Wow, 10 points just like that. 20-point life swing. All right, so the next set of creatures are creatures that are included to help close out the game. These creatures are paired very well, half of them are at least, are paired very well with the Haste of the Lightning Greaves. 2 of the creatures here don't need it because it's already built in, but it's more the Shroud. It's more the hexproof being able to swing in because a couple of these creatures have it, a couple of them don't. So let's stop the yakking and just get down to 1 copy of Sigarda, Host of Herons. 2 green and 2 white. It has hexproof, so spot removal is useless on it. And it's a 5/5 flyer, and spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. So with the Lightning Greaves and an absolute ton of exalted triggers out there, we can drop down the Sigarda, we can equip it, give it haste, and swing for a huge amount in the air. 1 copy of Sigarda, Host of Herons. Next, we are also going to stay in the realm of hexproof, and we're going to include a copy of Carnage Tyrant, 4 and 2 green. It's a 7/6, can't be countered with trample and hexproof. A lot of what we said with Sigarda also holds true for Carnage Tyrant. It doesn't have the in-the-air evasion, but that trample on a 7/6 that's going to get so much bigger because of all of the different Exalted triggers. Carnage Tyrant is a beast in this deck. It is a finisher. And lastly, the last 2 creatures, it's a 2 of, and we have to do it because she's just that good, folks. 2 copies of Achroma, Angel of Wrath. 5 and triple white. It's a 6/6 angel, and it brings it all. Flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, and protection from red. 2 copies of Achroma, and more likely than not, when she hits the battlefield, the game is going to be over. Particularly if you have any of our Exalted triggers. Rafika the Many maybe is out there. The game is going to end very soon after Achroma enters the battlefield. And if we're able to luckily put the Lightning Greaves on her, giving her Shroud, therefore disabling any attempts at spot removal, because she does not have protection from white. So she's a great target for a Swords to Plowshares or a Path to Exile. However, that's why we got the 1 copy of Lightning Greaves, 2 copies of Achroma, Angel of Wrath. And that is it, fans of MTG Burgeoning. That is deck tech number 41. This is Bant Exalted. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.